Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Thank you for joining me, and welcome to episode 213 of the podcast. It's always exciting to sit behind the microphone as I sit and prepare for each episode and just try to gather and organize my thoughts so that what I have to share with the audience comes across concisely and precisely as I mean it. And each episode is 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. I try to keep them as short bits of information or nuggets of information and ideas. I don't want to make each episode too long. I know generally, folks' attention span, our attention span is becoming shorter and shorter as we are able to consume more and more information from so many varied sources. So when you come to the podcast, I want to be able to deliver the message for each episode in as concise a way as possible. And the idea for this episode has kind of been germinating for a while. I've heard, and I'm sure you have heard, people say, or people post online, I am enough, right? Or you are enough. And I understand where that comes from because we have been sort of cultured to think that we are insufficient, deficient, and in an effort to enhance or increase someone's esteem, for some to find and learn the value of themselves, we share this message that says you are enough. And I want to certainly echo that. You are enough. I am enough. But the question is, certainly, yes, we are enough, but are we doing enough? Do we know enough? And as we are encouraging each other to find love of self, to establish self-esteem, to love ourselves, value ourselves and each other, I don't want us to negate the fact that there are areas in each of our lives where we should be improving. We should recognize that there are areas of our lives where we may actually be insufficient or deficient. And as I began, I said, we've been cultured in this society to lack a value of self. And I mean, that's what helps a capitalist, consumer-driven economy work, right? That we think that we are some way not good enough, insufficient. So if I am convinced by the commercials and the ads that run, then if I acquire these things, if I purchase these things, whether it's fashion, right? Whether it's pocketbooks or if it's iPhones or cars or a house in a certain neighborhood, if I acquire these possessions, then I can be all that I should be, right? When I'm talking with young women, I help them understand how makeup commercials work. And no makeup commercial begins by telling a girl, you are good just as you are, right? You have everything that you need. Your lashes are the right length. Your skin tone is perfect. The shape and size of your lips are fine. No, these commercials work because they're convincing us or trying to convince us that we need their product so that our lashes and our lips and our skin and this and that can be what whoever's deciding, whoever's making the rules and setting the standard, so that we can be what it is that we should be. We could fit this standard that interestingly always has a goal line that's moving. And so as we are being taught and trained from very early on that if we could just acquire and apply these purchases, these consumer goods, these products, that we will be good enough. Let's also be clear that in that programming, if you will, in that socializing, we are being inundated with ideas that just are not congruent to us living and existing in peace. And so, yes, sis, you are enough and I am enough, but let's be clear that we don't know enough, right? Let's be clear that we may not be doing enough. I don't want us in our important quest to help sisters love themselves, to know themselves, to be themselves, and to value themselves. I don't want us to also convince them or ourselves that we do not need to be accountable to growth, to learning, to correction and guidance. And that can be, there could be a thin line between that, because when someone has been beat up and beat down and made to hate themselves and find, that they are just not valued, just not valuable, then we're pulling them out of that and say, nah, sis, you're good just the way you are. But be careful that we're not suggesting in any way that there are standards that we really should be living to, and that we should be accountable to that. Just because, sis, we are teaching and encouraging each other to love self, that doesn't mean that we've learned everything that we need to learn, that we're living the lives that we deserve to live, and that our children, our families, and our community deserve from us. So I just want us to be very thoughtful in all of the messages. This message that I'm sharing with you is something that I've given a great deal of thought to. And I know that we get so many mixed messages, and I want us to not take hold onto ideas or messages that are unrealistic, that are unnatural, or that are short-sighted. Not because they're being delivered with malice, but because while we are pushing out these narratives and these messages that are so important, that sis, you are enough. But that does not mean that we're good enough at everything that we should be good at. I hope you're understanding what I'm trying to say. There's so much work that needs to be done in our community, right? And it doesn't have to be, a work that makes front page news, but what we're doing in our homes, right? What we're doing on our block, what we're doing on our street, what we're doing with our children, what we're doing with our husbands, what we're doing with our families, our mothers, our grandmothers, our fathers, our grandfathers, our uncles, our aunts, our siblings, right? Are we doing enough in our family to help our family win and be successful? Are we doing enough at home, right? Are we making sure our children are eating nutritious meals, making sure that we have nutritious meals prepared for our husbands, for ourselves, that we're taking care of our own bodies in eating nutrition and foods that are rich and wholesome and all of the good things, and that we are abstaining from foods and not feeding foods to our children that are processed, full of fat, full of sodium, full of sugar, right? Do we know that we should be observant in the ingredients in the foods that we're feeding our families? Because what we do in the kitchen can determine the lifespan of our family, right? And our children, they're our future, they're our hereafter. And we want to make sure that we start them off with good habits. So yes, we are enough, but are we doing enough? Do we know enough? Um, are we educated enough? Are we cultured enough? There's so many young women, and I think about some of the women who are my age, in my age range, I'll say, and didn't have the training and the life training and the rearing in some of the areas that I have, that I'd learned to think were common, right? And that they were not, in fact, common. Not that I'm trying to suggest I had a perfect upbringing, but the women who raised me were older, right? So I got a lot of those old school values and the training that came from older women who had a certain standard for how women and girls should act, right? And if we don't have that, and if we don't have it, we don't know that there's something that's missing that we should be passing on to our girls. So it's so important, right? And listen, I'm not talking about rocket science. I'm talking about, you don't chew with your mouth open. You don't talk with your mouth full of food. You don't put your elbows on the table. Just certain certain aspects of culture, refinement, etiquette, and dignity in the way that a woman carries herself, and in the way a woman speaks. I mean, the way I was raised, if I was to say the word ain't, it was surely to get me popped in the lips, right? There were certain words: yes, please; no, thank you, right? May I? These are just some basic points of etiquette that so many women lack. And sometimes when you don't come in contact with a lot of different people, then you think that everyone was raised as you are. And that's just not the case. And there are generations of women who, like myself, was not raised by their own biological mother, who had aunts, grandmothers, putting things in them that were maybe what you may consider traditional. But then, I also understand that there's been a gap. There's been this generation gap. And so a lot of those points of refinement were just not passed on because of that gap. And so now we're watching our young women come out in the public and comport themselves and conduct themselves in a way that is just not fitting or becoming of the beautiful nature of a Black woman. So while we are pumping each other up, pumping ourselves up, and learning to love ourselves and value ourselves, then that does not mean that we don't have room to grow. So sis, you are enough. But remember that you and I recognizing that we are enough doesn't mean that there are not areas in our lives where we should reject correction, right? Your husband say, hey, you haven't, I don't know, whatever lifestyle and values you and your husband have, but maybe you haven't done something that is an expectation of your marriage. You say, hey, you can't tell me what to do because I'm enough. Well, listen, you are enough, but are you doing enough? Do you know enough? And once we've reached the point where we no longer accept learning, where we no longer accept correction, where we no longer accept guidance, that's a unfortunate state to be in. So what I would suggest is constantly find areas of learning, areas of improvement in what area of your life. And if we, as I said, if we don't have exposure, then we might not know what we're missing. We may not know areas of our lives that we may need to strengthen. So what I would suggest is, it's great. It's so great to have relationships. It's so great to have community and network, because you can observe a really decent quality that another woman has and say, ooh, I didn't even realize that I wasn't doing that, right? I didn't realize that I could do this better. I could do this differently, and I could have great results, or better results. So as we are loving ourselves, valuing ourselves, and encouraging others to love and value us, let's not miss out on opportunities of growth, opportunities of learning. And let us not think that now that we have, perhaps finally accepted the idea that we're worthy of love and we're worthy of esteem and acceptance, that we don't just shut it all down and not permit ourselves those critiques in those finer areas, because, we could be missing out, and we would be missing out on the growth of our own potential, of realizing our own potential. There's so much more in us. So I've seen sometimes where we can get the message of being enough, but then also thinking, I've done enough, I've learned enough. And I can say that I don't know that there's any such thing as learning enough and improving enough and constantly finding ways of growth. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Let me know what you think. You can put your comments in the app that you're using to listen. You can always email me at nora@noraspeaks.com. If you listen on Apple, I encourage you, I ask and request that you leave a comment or you leave a review. Let others know what you think about the episode. When they go to the reviews, they'll say, oh, so-and-so left this review. This listener left this rating. And so maybe this podcast is something I should listen to as well. Thank you so much. Until next time, stay in peace.
We were brought here as a piece of property. And to keep that piece of property, it is to not allow the property to know the value of the property. What I mean by that, if you had known the history of yourself, you would not have been made a slave. And you won't be a slave now if you have a knowledge of yourself. It's hard to enslave a person that have equal knowledge with you. You just can't do it. And so this knowledge of yourself is the thing that will free you from what you have been suffering from.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.